Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I'm getting ready to crash out for the night. I'm getting ready to go to bed, but before I do, we are covering X-Men Part 6. Yes, we are. The conclusion of the X-Men story, or at least the first story arc of X-Men by Jonathan Hickman. So, this is pretty solid, but what it does is it requires us to kind of wind back to House and Powers of X, right? It all just kind of wraps back around to the beginning of everything and how it all sort of started. And the way this picks up is it sort of jumps to the past, right? At some point in the past, there was a kind of discussion that took place between Irene Adler and Mystique. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Irene Adler is also somebody by the name of Destiny. And you've probably heard of what are called Destiny's books or Destiny's diaries. That was part of an Extreme X-Men story from 2001, The Hunt for Destiny's Diaries, which is actually pretty cool, right? This idea that she wrote 13 books, which basically detailed what was going to happen in the future. But Irene Adler originally appeared back in Uncanny X-Men issue number 141, right? So she was basically introduced as part of the Days of Future Past saga. And then from there, she was really kind of brought in as essentially this love interest and wife of Mystique, right? The two of them fell in love, the two of them had a relationship, and it was pretty solid. It's one of those things that only for hardcore X-Men fans do you really know about it. It's really pretty obscure, right? And even Destiny herself is pretty obscure in relation to like the greater comic book landscape. But the long and short of this is that she ultimately ended up dying in Uncanny X-Men issue number 255. Basically, the two of them were always kind of like the 1-2 punch of what was essentially the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in Marvel Comics after the events of Magneto basically leaving, that and Freedom Force. What Destiny ends up saying is that she's got something to tell Mystique, right? Like, I have something to tell you. But before we find out what it is, we jump to the here and now. And what this shows us is that work is still being done by Orcas. Now, again, for those of you guys who are playing catch up from House and Powers of X, and I highly suggest that you guys go and check out my playlist on the X-Men, which you'll find down in the description, and it'll get you totally caught up on pretty much everything going on. But Orcas is kind of like this anti-mutant organization, more or less, that basically composes or is composed of a lot of organizations, right? So Hydra has a hand in it. The Advanced Idea Mechanics groups has a hand in it. All kinds of different groups, right? The only group that I do not believe is involved in Orcas are the Purifiers, although I could be wrong. But the overall gist behind this is that if you guys recall, in the events of House and Powers of X, that the X-Men had basically launched an attack against the Orcas Corporation in order to destroy Mother Mold. And Mother Mold was basically a giant sentinel that was going to produce Master Molds, and Master Molds in turn produce the regular sentinels that you guys are used to seeing. And what this would do, or at least what it would have done had it, been successful, is it would have led to the development of sentinels at a geometric rate, right? It would have just been insane how fast the sentinel production would have been ramped up by humanity. And so in order to keep that from happening, and really kind of under the information provided to them by Moira McTaggart due to the various lives that she's lived over, the 10 timelines, whatever the case is, she ended up, the X-Men ended up traveling to Orcas Corporation, and then in turn, basically, taking out Mother Mold, which, letting it crash into the sun, but also resulted in all of their deaths, right? And so what we end up having here is a guy by the name of Dr. Devo, right? Or Dr. Devo, however it is that you want to pronounce it. Although I guess it's really Director Devo is really what it is. But anyway, he's the guy overseeing the whole Orcas Corporation. And of course, working on a device. This device is taken directly to Dr. Gregor. Now, Dr. Gregor, if you guys recall, was the woman who lost her husband during the X-Men strike on Orcas Station, right? So for her, it's not really about, the possibility of a mutant threat for her. It's now like a personal vendetta is really what it is, right? It's a personal vendetta against the X-Men. And so what we end up finding out here, or at least the way things look, is of course she's kind of building this sort of chassis. But before we really find out what it is, what we end up doing is jumping back to the plans that were basically being made with regards to Mystique and with Charles Xavier and the mission that was going to take place with regards to Orcas base. And now, if you guys, again, this is one of those important stories because it kind of bounces back and forth, with House and Powers of X. But the idea behind this is that when Xavier and company initially went to Mystique and basically said, like, we want you to be on this mission, but because we want you to serve a particular purpose, the question was, what is this purpose? And ultimately they said, we want you to plant a seed. And so this is kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff that we did not initially see when we were reading House and Powers of X. And remember, that's the nature of Jonathan Hickman, right? Hickman will do a thing, he'll write a part of a story, and then he'll leave part of it out, right? And then like later on down the line, you'll figure out what that part of the story was and why it's important, right? So there can be a lot of bouncing around and a lot of shuffling and things along those lines, but the idea was to plant a seed, seemingly a door, a Krakoan gateway on the ship that nobody was going to know about. And this is when we basically ended up picking up with Mystique during the events of House and Powers of X when she was killed, right? When she was basically sucked out of an airlock luck, and it basically seemed to be the end of her. And it's kind of a funny thing, because then of course we basically pick up with the resurrection of Mystique, and then that's when she essentially gets into the deal that was being made, right? The idea that if she agreed to work alongside Charles Xavier and Magneto, that she would be given something in turn. And the question is, what is it that she was supposed to give, right? What is it she was supposed to essentially get, as a result of working along with them? And it's one of these funny things, right? Because when they're talking, Xavier kind of says, basically like, we're grateful for everything that you've done, but ultimately we need more. And that's really kind of one of the issues that you get when it comes to Xavier and Magneto in their current state is, yes, they're operating on a greater authority, that authority coming from Moira McTaggart, who's basically said, I've experienced multiple timelines, they all end the same way, this is the way for us to change things, that kind of stuff. But it also brings in a lot of hubris, a lot of arrogance, right? The whole we know better than you do kind of attitude, which could really cause a lot of problems, especially when you're dealing with somebody like Mystique, because for all the glitz and glamour and all the talk that they basically have, Mystique is one of the best people to bring in on their side, because she's lived for hundreds of years, right? She's been around longer than Wolverine has, right? So she's an exceedingly old character. But the idea is that she also has a lot of experience under her belt. She's been a good guy, she's been a bad guy. When she led Freedom Force, it was a US government sanctioned team, right? They basically went out and saved mutants from anti-mutant groups, right? It was really done like in exchange for pardons, right? For them to basically be given pardons from their actions as a brotherhood, because that's what Freedom Force was, just the reformed brotherhood of evil mutants. But when they're having this whole conversation, what they're basically doing, at least the initial question of Mystique is, okay, if this gate didn't work, then what happens if I try to walk through it, right? Because the issue is that she died before her actions could be recorded by Cerebro, right? So if you guys recall, what Hickman's established here is that death doesn't really exist anymore, right? Any mutant that dies can be brought back. And it's not done for the purpose of just being like, oh, we're just, it's whatever, it's being done by basically saying it serves a purpose, right? There's a reason behind why this happened. But one of the things that's been going on here is that with the X-Men or various mutants who are being sent on missions, their minds are always backed up. And so should they return from that mission, the information they have is backed up in Cerebro. So the X-Men, or really the mutant population, always has an updated database on what's going on around the world with the various missions that are being undertaken and things like that. And so the result is that with Mystique, her mind was not backed up before she died, right? So there was no way to know if she had successfully planted the device, planted the gateway on Krakoa. And because it was such a secret mission, no one was supposed to know about it, right? So it's not like, they can go to Jean Grey and say, hey, like, can you tell us whether or not she planted that gateway? Because not even Jean Grey knew that it was going to be going on, right? Like, nobody knew that this was being done by Xavier and Magneto through Mystique. And so ultimately, when she ends up, donning an outfit and passing through, she ends up finding out, yes, it worked exactly like it was supposed to. And that's when she comes to the realization of what's actually going on, right? The idea here that what's essentially been taking place is that where it was believed that the mother mold was essentially going to create master mold, which in turn was going to create sentinels, who in turn would create Nimrods, ultimately that's not what happened. That instead, Nimrods were manufactured by humans directly. They were created explicitly by human beings. They were not created by sentinels. And that was the big error that was being discovered here, right? The idea that Nimrod is essentially being designed and isn't really functional yet, but will be, and is functioning, or at least is being built on the Orcas station. So humans are developing these ultra sentinels, right? And it kind of makes sense, right? It makes sense to kind of create these sentinels that are virtually indestructible, because that's one of the things about Nimrod, is Nimrod has the ability to sense the inherent weaknesses of the mutants he's facing off against. So then of course also, know what their powers are just by tapping into the Sentinel database. He has a whole host of different abilities, right? Shape-shifting, different things like that. But he's one of the most dangerous threats out there. Nimrod is exceedingly powerful. And so that's one of the big things, is because when you end up having this go down, they initially try to get Mystique to go back in and to basically, destroy the Nimrod program or whatever the case is. But her response is no. And the reason why is because she wants Destiny to come back. And that was the deal that was made. The deal that was made by Xavier and Magneto is, if you do this for us, we'll bring back Destiny. And so ultimately, when Mystique tries to barter and Mystique tries to get them to bring her back, ultimately they don't. They're just kind of like, no, like you need to do for us, like we'll bring her back once you've earned it, right? Like once you've earned the right to have Destiny returned to you, then it will be done. And that's why we end up that's where we end up jumping into the conversation between Destiny and Mystique, right? And this is probably one of the single most important things to go on here. What Destiny basically says is, she says, sometime in the future I'm going to die, right? Like I'm going to die prematurely before I grow old or anything like that. I'll die before old age takes me. But there will also come a point many years after that where there will be an island, right? And on this island there will be mutants who are inhabiting there, and they will make a deal with you in order to bring me back. But ultimately they're never going to hold true to their deal, right? They're going to do everything they can to deny you my return, right? Like in order for this to, in this instance, when this time comes, like what I want you to do is to bring me back, right? Like bring me back do not let me stay dead, right? Like bring me back, because the ultimate idea is that those individuals want us to be blind. They want us to be blind and to follow their plan without any question whatsoever. What this does is it hits at the idea, and we don't really know whether or not, Destiny's being nefarious here. There's really no reason to believe she is. What she's basically establishing here is the idea that Charles Xavier and Magneto are essentially, well, of course they're being dubious, right? Being mysterious, but they're not really looking out for the overall betterment of mutant kind, right? That's not really what they're shooting for. There's some kind of alternative plan going on here. Presumably, the mutant population could be used as cannon fodder, and whatever happens to them happens to them. But having a precognitive like Destiny show up on the scene would essentially disrupt all their plans, because Destiny's well known to the mutant population, right? And even to the world population. S.H.I.E.L.D. knows who she is, the Avengers know who she is, everybody knows who Destiny was, right? And so with that being the case, when she shows back up, if she shows back up, immediately her precognitive abilities are going to be recognized as, for the most part, absolute. And if she comes along and she says, guys, everything that you've been told is wrong, here's what's actually going to happen, people will listen to her, and they'll really kind of begin ignoring Charles Xavier and Magneto, which can cause all kinds of problems, right? So the return of Destiny could be cool, but it could also cause some crazy things to take place. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace. Okay, I want to give a shout out to Kyle B, David Joseph, Ben, John H, AJ, Matt N, Jeff R, John H, Lean and Mean, which is an awesome name, Jason C, Austin S, Austin H, Joey M, Steven Z, Austin B, Adam K, and Genosis 916. Remember, guys, you can send me messages, and I'll run off whatever your message is at the end of the video, so long as there's nothing crazy. But if you want to put a message in there, send me an email, rob@robertjefferson.com, and if you are one of these people who gets shout outs, then I will tack it in there. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys.